Let's get started with the story we gave you yesterday, but it looks like we have to hit the pause button on it today. It's more of a sports betting story, which really isn't capturing maybe a lot of headlines elsewhere, but for our show, it certainly is. Jontay Porter, you may remember him. I'll review again, former NBA player who was accused of throwing games, essentially, because of his player props. He was the player that was pleading a guilty conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Yesterday was supposed to be the sentencing. He played on the Raptors. There were some player props that were posted on the sports books, and Porter left games early so that he would go under on some of these folks. Yes, this is what was happening. Well, in November, the sentencing was pushed back to May 2025, so we won't find out exactly what kind of jail time Porter receives. He's expected to receive some, but this is the legalese of what's going on here. So check back with us in May around Memorial Day, and we'll find out. May seems like a long time from now. We still got a Super Bowl to get to, an NCAA Final Four, a lot more as well. All right, Patrick Mahomes is a full participant. Looks like he's going to go this coming Saturday. Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs have a Saturday game this week, and then, of course, they play on Christmas Day, which you can catch our coverage here on SportsGrid. Next Wednesday, I'll be part of that, so hopefully you can check me out. TJ Watt returns to practice. That's good news for the Steelers. Ahead of their game with the Ravens, George Pickens remains out. So Pickens right now seems to be questionable for the game, and the Steelers offense really struggles without him. Michael Penix Jr. getting ready for his first career start. We reported this yesterday that he's going to get the call over Kirk Cousins, who goes to the bench. And like many other people, just like you and me, Michael Penix was shopping yesterday at Costco when he got the call, and he was told that he's going to start this week.
Yeah, I was actually shopping. I was shopping with my girlfriend. We was at Costco, and I got the call, and they told me that I was going to be the starting quarterback, for the rest of the season, and as you can imagine, it was some nerves, it was excitement, but I'm just super blessed to be in this position, super blessed to be on this team for the opportunity, and it was always like I always say, my family, they always say, just trusting God, trusting the process, and, go about each and every day, with that trust and belief that whenever it's your time, it's your time. And they called last night, and they said it was my time. So, just the mental reps, that was always there. Always make sure I'm prepared, preparing like the starter and always being ready because I didn't know when my number was going to be called. It could have been called at any point. So just me making sure I was ready, that was the biggest thing. And, as far as you talking about like the physical part, as far as getting the reps with the guys, that'll come this week. And we got this week to prepare. And, I already talked to some of the receivers and they said they're ready to, get those reps. If we got to do it after practice to get more, they're willing to. And, that's the biggest thing, just make sure I find time to get with those guys. So.
I think right now Michael Penix is probably as excited as he's ever been over the course of his college or pro football career. Okay, last night in the bowl game last night, the LA Bowl, just before the game, one of UNLV's top players said, I'm not playing in this one. Regardless, the line totally flipped. Cal was favored, and then UNLV somehow was favored. You really have to either be watching us here at SportsGrid or paying close attention to these lines, folks, because they are like literally flipping. But Cal last night just didn't show up for this one. 24-13 as UNLV wins. By the way, the Rebels' new head coach is Dan Mullen, and he's going to take over immediately after the game. Also, congratulations in order here in Boca Raton, where James Madison came back to beat Western Kentucky by a final of 27-17. They covered the 6.5-point spread. It was the first ever bowl win for James Madison University, and you'll see here in this clip, they were awarded the Howard Schnellenberger Trophy. Schnellenberger built the FAU program and, of course, former head coach there. And at the University of Miami, here's Bob Chesney on the first ever bowl win.
Yeah, I think just a great moment in the history of our program to be the first ever, to do anything for the first is a big deal. And to do it down here in Boca at a bowl game, matters a lot to this, not only program, but to the community and to all these young men that believed and, to assemble the group like we did in a very short period of time and have them believe and fight for one another and then have the next man up mentality throughout the entire day, throughout the entire week, really throughout the entire year. And then we talk about it all the time, but at some point that light shines on you. And I don't know if 11 to 12 over here thought it would shine on like it did, but when that does, it's either going to, reveal you for all the work you've done, or it's going to expose you for the work you didn't do. And to be, the backup and the backup to the backup and all of those things that they were throughout the year. They battled, they stayed the course, they never ever gave up. and glad that light shined on them, had a chance to reveal all the hard work they've done up to this point in time.
All right, so big win for JMU in Boca last night. Wake Forest has hired their new head coach. Jake Dickert is going to take over officially and immediately. Also in the transfer portal, John Mateer has chosen to transfer to Oklahoma. He's left Washington State. Mateer was considered one of the top players in the transfer portal. Meanwhile, the University of Alabama, their athletic director is telling, how about this, fans to fight back to help fund these NILs. Kind of peculiar, but let's give you the statement here from Greg Byrne, their athletic director. Although we have been competitive from an NIL standpoint, our competition has us in their sights, and you're actively trying to surge ahead with NIL. You've heard examples of other teams using promises of $1 million paydays to lure away players or convince them not to come to Alabama. It's time for Bama Nation to fight back. Okay, fair enough. Get as much money as you can for these kids. Caden Salter has joined Colorado. He's transferring from Liberty. Shedeur Sanders is headed to the NFL. Maybe he becomes a starter next season. San Jose star wide receiver Nick Ash has opted out of the Hawaii Bowl, which I believe is the only game played, if I'm not mistaken, on the 31st of December each year. And Eli Sanders heading to USC for 1 year after leaving New Mexico. Folks, it is hard to keep up with all of these transfers, but me and Frank and Luke, we're doing our best every day to tell you who's going where. All right, so tonight it is the New Orleans Bowl. It's the lone game on the schedule. And Georgia Southern, my understanding is, going back and looking at these lines when they came out, Georgia Southern was 6.5-point favorites. For some reason, it is now down to 4.5. I guess they have some players transferring. Sam Houston State plus 4.5 tonight, total of 48.5. So this is expected to be a closer game than maybe it was a couple of weeks ago. Auburn basketball star, Wooden Award winner Johnny Broome avoids shoulder surgery. Good news for him. MRI results show that he's not going to miss extended time. Crazy game in college basketball last night between Oklahoma and Michigan. We talked about this yesterday. My gosh, Michigan has lost some really close games. This time, Jeremiah Fears, great player for Oklahoma, converts a 4-point play with just 11 seconds left to beat the Wolverines by a final of 87-86. Michigan has now lost in consecutive weeks by a bucket, first to Arkansas, now, of course, to Oklahoma. Dusty May, head coach of the Wolverines, gave all the credit for the big shot by Fears.
Both teams competed at a high level, and obviously it came down to the last possession, and Fears made a big-time shot, especially in this environment, but I thought our guys battled. They competed. We're better than we were a week ago. And so as gut-wrenching as a game like this is, you've got to find a way to keep moving forward. It's not one thing. We've got to get more of a killer mindset. We took care of the ball much better today. There were still a couple errors just on basic entries that they turned into a pick six late. We botched a blob. That's on me. We ran a very basic play to get it into Vlad's hands, and somebody saw something and bumped back the play. But that's on me. We got to execute better in that situation, especially late clock. And the last possession, just like at the Garden, Danny in open court, busted floor and a ball screen. We're going to get a wide open shot, and he created that, and got a good look at it.
I think right now Michigan just needs some days off here for the Christmas holiday.